Right. So it's worth answering that again, right? You do have to go through a governmental process, either through the EOC or through some state or local agency that has an agreement with the EOC. And remember, this was a compromise for employers. I mean, it's as it's turned out, people are sometimes really helped by the EOC. But in any number of other laws, you have a right under the law and you can go to court. Sometimes there are laws that say you can go to an agency if you want to, but you don't have to. Okay, that's clearly giving the most, freedom and power to the person who experienced discrimination. They were not able to get that in 1964. It just, I'm just saying, in terms of some of the stuff I've read, these employers in the South, they were like, no, you force them to go through some hoops, force them to go through a government agency where it has to be confidential by the agency and where we can try to negotiate before we go to court. So you do have to go. Ordinarily, that can be very helpful. And if the agency is taking a long time, you can just get your notice of a right to sue, right? So they can't hold you up indefinitely. It's just particularly problematic now if the EOC is not doing what it's supposed to do with regard to these charges. So that's a great question, and it, I think, will be important to various people in different ways. So number one, obviously, EEOC and the employment law is only you versus the employer, right? Because we know there are cases being litigated right now. In fact, there was one just filed yesterday, whatever, by the ACLU, challenging these grant requirements, okay? But if an employer says, you know what, I just want to play it safe, so I'm going to demand certain things of you. Okay, let's say they demand that you take your pronouns off. Okay, I don't think any court probably at this point will necessarily say that that is illegal discrimination. Maybe they will say it's harassment, but it's certainly pervasive because it happens all the time, but I don't know, right? But if the employer does other things, like allowing people to misgender you or not, protecting you against other harassment, then of course, then the employer is liable. And the reason I'm glad you asked that question is, like you said, it's doubtful that your employer is going to do that. But I bet you there might be people watching this who are working for employers who are capitulating. And then those employers need to understand they put themselves at legal risk if they discriminate against an employee based on their LGBTQ plus status. Right. So we actually don't know. I have a feeling that a non-binary person is facing probably the same issues that trans folks are facing. I think if someone is intersex, but the discrimination has not had anything to do with that, can you imagine that we'd be telling people to hide this basic part of their identity in order to have their charges dealt with correctly? Can you imagine having to say that? But that's probably the thing to say, right? If you have a claim that is race discrimination, sexual harassment, disability, and you also happen to be transgender, you could end up getting messed up. I talked to someone else, a lawyer, who was really close to getting a reasonable cause determination, which, as I explained, is a very helpful document to have. It was a disability discrimination claim brought by a transgender person, and then suddenly it just got stopped. It's like radio silence and no reasonable cause determination letter. So part of what is so concerning here is that it's not just gender identity claims that may not be dealt with correctly, but also other claims if they're brought by a trans person, or I think probably a non-binary person. There was not the same attack on sexual orientation claims early on. But again, I think we have some concerns now because of what the acting chair has done with regard to some segments of the harassment guidance in particular. And we just need to get this information out as far as we can. We need to encourage people to send an email to prideandexile11@gmail.com if they are bringing a claim and if they are having problems.
Thank you, Kai. Another question that came in is, do I need to hire a lawyer for my EEO complaint process, or can I do it on my own for the whole process?
You absolutely can do the whole EEOC process on your own without a lawyer. And as I said, one of the benefits of this compromise to the employers has been to help, I kid you not, thousands and thousands of people who have come to the EEOC over the years without a lawyer. They just have the conversation with the investigator writes up the charge, they sign it, the investigator puts it into the portal, the employer responds, the investigator is talking to witnesses, all with no money, charged to the person, no lawyer. And very often the employer will then settle, if the EEOC finds some reasonable cause. And so the person not only never has to get a lawyer, never has to go to court. Because if you're going to court, you're going to want a lawyer. So, you know, you don't need a lawyer. That has been one of the positive things of the EEOC. At this point, if the EEOC is not going to do its job, you may need a lawyer. And again, Pride and Exile cannot provide legal resources, but we are trying to collect lists of lawyers who will be able to help folks. Okay, I think you've gotten a question that stumps me, because even though I did do some intakes, that was not something that I saw. My guess is, and anyone on this call from the EEOC who knows better, my sense is that this is telling the investigator that this is someone they can talk to about your case. Remember, an EEOC investigator has to keep everything confidential. So you can have a representative, may not be a lawyer, that the investigator can speak to as well. But we will make sure that that is a correct answer. If there's a better answer, guess what? This is why you can edit recordings, and we'll just put that answer in. So I want to say two things. One is, in terms of what we should be trying to get employers to do in their policies, is to make it clear that misgendering a person, not unintentionally, not by mistake, not fixing it after you've been told, but intentionally, persistently misgendering a person, we need to have employers say clearly in their policy, that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable in this employment place, because that's going to be our best chance, to be honest, of stopping this. Whether it would be found to be illegal harassment, I believe it should be, right? I believe it's clearly pervasive because, happening on a consistent, ongoing basis. Even though it's not being done to the person themselves, remember I said, if they can have, bad behavior about a group overall that ends up spilling over onto that individual person. I mean, I think that'll be a harder thing to argue in court, but I would like to believe that it would be. But I won't kid you. I think that would probably be tough. And our best chance is to get employers to put these examples in their policies. I will tell you, I just got a request to do, respectful workplaces training, which is what I do together with anti-harassment training. And this company said, we specifically want examples about things that are harassing for trans employees and non-binary employees. And I was like, you go for it. I said, I have plenty of examples I can put in, you know. So I don't know if it would be illegal harassment, what a court would find. I do know it's something that employers should not want to have happen in their workplaces. If it is true that when folks come in with claims, transgender folks, non-binary folks come in with claims that the investigator knows is just going to go into a black hole if it's actually, proceeded on as a charge, and that person is offered mediation, it may well be worth it for the person to accept mediation if what they're really looking is for some action to be remedied. Okay, it's sometimes in mediation you also get money damages, but mostly the point about mediation is to fix the problem. It's not to make a determination of whether discrimination actually occurred, but it is to fix the problem. So I think that it's an interesting choice that the EEOC is still allowing their mediators to spend their time on these types of charges. I do find it quite, I don't know what, annoying, horrific, horrible that they're not letting a mediator sign their name to those. Talk about second-class citizenship. But assuming that's true, just saying that's what I heard, but at least it might result in a positive outcome for the person, which is often, to be honest, the most important thing. I will say that there is so much to be done at this point, right? Especially in this moment in time where LGBTQ plus people feel under siege, feel the most at risk of being harassed. I mean, in this moment in time, whatever we can do to give out information, to support people who are being subjected to harassment or other discrimination, whatever we can do, we should do. It might be just a little piece, but a little piece is better than nothing. So I hope you and others who hear this recording will help spread the word, will send out the documents, that lawyers will step up to help people, and we can put them on our list of resources. We all just have to do the best that we can in this situation. And I will end with this because I've been saying this a few times recently. I always used to say, I'm an optimist, right? An optimist is not Pollyannish, oh, everything's going to be okay, right? No, to me, an optimist is someone who takes the time to get a sense of the lay of the land. What's the reality we're dealing with? And then thinks, okay, what are the one or two steps we can take to move forward, even given the reality? That to me is an optimist, that there are steps that we can take. Now, I think all of us, our optimism has been challenged in ways that are just, incredible. But I think we just have to pick up and come on back and try to take those steps one by one. And to me, this information meeting and the materials, that's a piece in those steps. So with that, I wish you a lovely evening and thank you for giving Pride in Exile the ability to hold this type of meeting and to record this information and to send it around.